Hey everybody, David here, and welcome to the ASOG podcast. It has become evident that most shops can be divided into the haves, the have-nots, and the refusing to participate. Some shops have chosen to invest in factory tooling, subscriptions, and the training needed to become proficient in the different makes. Others, for whatever reason, haven't done so and may be facing obsolescence. What obstacles are these different shops facing in the near future? To answer those questions, we are joined by Chesney, the Senior Director of Customer Training at Advance Auto Parts. If anyone has a pulse on what shops are facing here in the near future, it's Chris. Be forewarned, however, this is only part one of our conversation. To hear the second part, you have to be an all-access patron. So, just go to asog.site, that's ASOG.site, and click on Become a Patron Now. And that will take you to our Patreon page. Become an all-access patron, and you'll have access to our bonus content. If you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. Again, we're on every single one. If you're catching us on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit a goal in subscribers and would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. And with all that out of the way, here we go.
So one of the things that I really, kind of the first things I knew about you is I watched one of Carm's podcast or listened to it, and it was you talking about ASE, and it was you talking about like how ASE was formed, where it was kind of started, and the whole goal behind it or the concept behind it. And you know, I've followed you for a long time because you're really at the forefront of change in our industry and kind of guiding us and leading us in a direction. And in last week on the podcast, we had somebody on and we were talking about certification and where are we going from here? And by that, I mean, you know, we're hearing a lot of people within ASOG talking about government regulation, talking about, hey, things are going to have to change at some point. When is that change coming? What does that look like? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time. I remember the podcast with Carm that I shared some of those thoughts. My history in the industry goes back to the first ASE test cycle, and I went with a mentor of mine. I was still in high school and went with him to Great Bend, Kansas to see what this thing was all about, just because I was going to ride with Harley somewhere. And he mentioned that it was the reason they were doing this is to keep the government out of their business. You know, at that point in time, we had to prove that we knew what we were doing so that we could keep the government at bay from trying to regulate our industry. And I can remember still to this day the fear in his voice and his eyes at that point in time, because he, as a shop owner, felt threatened. And then, you know, my tenure as a tech and moved from the middle of Kansas to Colorado in the late 70s, and actually started my training company in the early 90s and met Ron Weiner, the former president of ASE, a long-term president. I met his dad, and his dad tried to sell me a building in downtown Denver to house my training organization in. So I've been immersed in ASE since the very beginning. I was ASE certified very early in my career. And while the goal was noble, back in the day, we were working on, you know, a 79 Ford pickup, which might have had electronic ignition on it. And that scared the hell out of everybody. But we figured it out. And you could gauge somebody's knowledge base with a test and determine if they could, if they had enough knowledge to read a manual or approach the diagnostic of a new technology onboard a newer vehicle. Fast forward to today, in the middle of that period of time, ASE was put in charge of expanding their reach, different systems, different technologies, measuring your knowledge base on those, and giving you a certification on that knowledge. But then they invested in vocational education and put standards together for vocational schools through the NATEF program, which is now ASC Education Foundation, and established these task lists and these outcomes, if you will, for schools to approach a student with and measure whether or not they got it, so that you as shop owners could hire that person out of school and put them to work in a productive manner. And we've had that in place since the mid 80s. Well, in the meantime, the car changed, technology changed. I mean, rapidly. Just for you guys are old enough to remember the late 80s when things turned from carburation to fuel injection to OBD to data networks to all these neural networks, et cetera. And we're still dealing with the same standards of education and certification in our industry and expecting the same outcome. And that's insanity.
Right. Absolutely. And it's really interesting you bring that up, because I was talking to, I think it was Fanslow last week, where we talked about the fact that ASE right now is really a judge of base competency. And that all too often we see that someone is certified and we look at them as, hey, this guy can fix anything. But it's really our responsibility as shop owners to continue their education, to continue to lead them, guide them, raise them up to be the technician we need them to be. We can't just say, well, you're certified, you're good to go, and let them go in the bay. And I think that's one of the things that shop owners, we keep talking about the technician shortage. And look, it's a huge problem. I get it. And there's many facets of that problem. There's pay, there's education, there's the industry's tough, right? And I'm concerned that when we look at this and we say, hey, listen, certification can't just be the only thing that we do to judge the proficiency of a technician, but we're not doing that, right? Where do we go from here? I know you're big about growing technicians. I know that's where your heart is. If you could say one thing to shop owners today, what would it be? Where would we go from here?
Listen to Lucas. I mean, you get it, because you've recognized that you have to make that investment. You have to continue to invest. And really, we don't have a technician shortage. We don't have a headcount issue. We have a skill issue. And it's not necessarily a knowledge issue either. You see, in defense of ASE was challenged with measuring a technician's knowledge around a topic or a system. And it does a decent job of that. But with the technology that we have in place today, that we are challenged with analyzing and solving problems within, you have to be able to apply that knowledge. I call it turning a wrench in anger. You have to be able to, under pressure of performance, under pressure of your mortgage is due, under pressure that the customer's waiting in the front room, under pressure of the last one I had in here like this kicked my butt. You've got to have the skills to be able to apply that. And that means education has to change in the way of not just teaching you from the book about how a system works, but demonstrate how that system operates and how you view what normal is, so that you can recognize it when you see it. But then develop different strategic approaches to solving problems using basic competencies. A competency is a skill that you've learned, that you've put into practice, that you've exercised and and have now muscle memory, if you will, when you see it over and over again so that you become productive. But we have to be able to measure that. And ASE can't measure it. Let me rephrase that. ASE doesn't want to measure it because it's outside their scope. So that there's opportunity there. And there are several groups that I happen to be involved in. And I was on a call today with one of them, and we had this conversation today as well around how we start installing and implementing education in a different fashion than we have in the past, in a way that transfers knowledge, demonstrates application, and observes proof of skill, observes a technician demonstrating that skill. And so that's really, I've mentioned this, I shot a promotion video for our virtual classroom program a couple months ago, and I made the comment during the video that I hate to say COVID was a good thing, but for us at CTI, it opened our eyes and gave us the opportunity to implement things that we were in the middle of deploying in a way with an opportunity that shop owners and technicians would come visit and watch, that allows us to totally remodel the way we're approaching education in the industry and getting away from the sage on the stage, standing in front of a group of guys at 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night after you're tired and pontificating or bloviating on stage about GDI or some data network
Right.
that's new. Instead, do that virtually and spend our time face to face whenever we can get back to that, hopefully in the next few months. Spend that time at the center of the vehicle, putting that knowledge into action.
Exactly.
And so that's where education needs to go. And then certification needs to follow that and measure that.
Well, and that's one of the really interesting things, especially when we first kind of met and started talking. We were actually on one of I think it was a town hall panel, and we talked about daytime training and talked about where we were kind of headed with this. And I think the opportunity to put some training in front of our technicians, that they don't have to stay up till 10 o'clock and then drive 30 minutes home, is really, really powerful. I think it's important that we give them that opportunity. And I've long said we need to be training during the day. I have gone to nighttime classes and left saying, I don't think I took anything away from that. The educator could be great, but it doesn't mean you're going to learn because you're exhausted. So I think as we talk about some of the things that we've got coming up, and I know that eventually we get into a situation where if we're not careful, we're going to see some threats of government regulation coming back. Right. And I think the manufacturers, they get up there and they jump up and down and they say, oh, but security and there's some real big things and telematics and listen, this car could drive into somebody if somebody hacked it or whatever it may be. What are your thoughts on that? Where are we headed if we can't show that we can somewhat regulate our own industry? Because there's a lot of shops, especially in the independent realm, and we talk about this all the time, that maybe they shouldn't be working on vehicles, right?
Yeah, step away from the car. The timing's right to talk about this a little bit. I can talk openly about certain things, and there's other things I can't because of the groups that I'm working with on trying to implement some of the new legislation that passed in the last few weeks. Obviously, you can figure out where that's at, and the litigation that's going on to try to block that. The problem is politics plays a role in this. With the new administration coming in, there's probably more of a chance of government trying to regulate, depending on who gets their ear and how busy they are with other things. COVID will distract them for a good long period of time and other issues. But I don't really see that as a huge threat at this point in time, government coming down. I do see the opportunity to take what Massachusetts has done with not only the original right to repair, but with question 1 that passed this go around regarding sharing the data. I do see some opportunity there. The problem lies in that if you talk to the car guys, which they, by the way, didn't bring into the conversation when they stitched that legislation together. It didn't have anybody that had a clue as to how the vehicle works, how long the design timeline is, what to ask for in particular. Just give us everything. It's just they didn't put any brackets or description or boundaries around it. So it's still an argument. So if you ask the car guys, just tell us what you want. We can build that. That's not a problem. Just tell us so we can get it off our plate and go do something else. And then you talk to the leaders of these organizations, and it's, oh my gosh, we're going to sue them because that's not right. And unfortunately, I'll probably get in trouble for sharing my views. But at the end of the day, who gets hurt? It's you, me, the technicians, and more importantly, the motoring public. And it's all because nobody sat down at the beginning of the conversation and defined what should be shared, but more importantly, what you as a shop owner would probably actually put into use. And just as a side note, most of the franchise dealers have had access to a lot of this data that these legislators want to get access to and provide for us. They've had access to it for many years. Some of the manufacturers stopped giving it to them because they weren't using it.
Right. Well, and that brings up a valid point. And so my question to you is this: we've got somebody who frequents my shop from time to time, and we were talking about it a while back, and he said, his vision of it is eventually the manufacturer may come in and say, hey, you have to be certified under us to access this specific data or access programming opportunities or whatever it is. And he was saying that he thought that was a good way to ensure or secure that opportunity for us. And it would allow us to say, hey, listen, no, we've been through your program. You can't say we've been through your training. You can't say that we're not meeting your credentials. What do you think about something like that?
Well, number one, they always don't have the bandwidth or the manpower to be able to pull that off. Right. So that's number one. If they, for some reason, were forced to do so, or that became a reality, I think they'd struggle in getting it pulled together because there's so much red tape and government will get involved and bean counters will get involved, et cetera. I think the reality is that as we try to implement the new legislation, as we look at the probably the groundswell of consumer activity wanting a measuring stick to judge their technician or their service center by. I don't think that really exists to a large extent today, but it will as technology advances. I mean, today they don't even know they've got adaptive cruise control or lane keep assist, or they forgot they had it because they turned it off when they first got the car. But somewhere down the line, something's going to cause or create that incentive to want to know who's got their act together and who doesn't. In other words, I'm tired of taking my car to Joe down the street because every time I go see him, it's $1,000 and then I have to take it to Lucas to get the car fixed. So I think where that's probably, I can tell you where I'm trying to hurt all that, and that's towards programs that we already have in place, whether it be through ETI or NASTEF and the vehicle security professional path. There's systems in place to be able to qualify a tech, and that could include education. and number one, you've got to validate that when Lucas calls and says that it's me, we got to be able to validate that it's truly you, Lucas, and not David that's calling on your behalf, right? So we just got to make sure that from a security perspective that we know who you are. From that point, then we can track everything and create a clearinghouse of education, credentials, training, tools and equipment. A secure gateway. We've got the ability to see who's connecting and or what's connecting, and eventually who's behind the wheel of that device. So all of that's going to be important because, and probably more important to have it done through a neutral party, which the OEs are already a part of. I mean, they deal with ETI and NASDEF on a daily basis, and they deal willingly. So why reinvent the wheel and create an adversarial opportunity?
Situation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we can do this if we just keep the bigwigs over in the corner distracted. The engineers and the techs can get together and we can figure this out pretty quickly.
It seems to me that the manufacturers are just putting financial hurdles in the way, and solely financial hurdles in the way. In other words, if you can't pay fee after fee after fee, then you're not getting any access regardless of your skill level, regardless of your tooling. And then that's it.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily see just from the fact that you have to have a certain level of skill to get in and reprogram a module or to get in and do whatever you need to do. I think that keeps a lot of shops from even messing with it.
Yeah,
and so it just becomes expensive for an independent repair shop to be able to offer those services, because you look at ADOS. It's $40,000 or whatever to put in an Autel device, and you have to have the space for it. Meanwhile, the Ford dealership down the street from me is charging something like $130 to reprogram that. I can't charge $130 and put that kind of investment into my shop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's an example of early adoption with new technologies without full disclosure of what really needs to be done to appropriately service them. I would tell you my approach to ADOS is vastly different than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And that's because there are so many different business models around ADOS from the standpoint of especially calibration. And it depends on the market. It depends on your geographic location. It depends on your demographics. Depends on the type of work you do. Depends on who your customers are, especially commercial customers. And so there's a lot of variables in play now, and I would certainly approach buying equipment for ADOS differently today than I would have 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And that's just, we've got all the equipment at the research center. We have all the equipment at all of our partner tech centers, and we rarely use some of the equipment because we just don't need it. Our customer base takes care of, for example, forward-facing cameras are, typically a windshield opportunity, and that's handled by the glass company that tends to service the majority of our customers. So we really don't use forward-facing targets. We've got radar reflectors, and a handful of those covers most everything. So that's the majority of the work. Now, being service ready, and me being that service ready guy, I would come back and slap myself upside the head and say, but what if you've got that one customer that comes in and you have to say no? There is that. So I think there's a lot of risk that we take in early adoption of either over or under equipping ourselves or over or under educating ourselves. And the problem with ADOS is not that you made the wrong decision or the right decision. It's that you're dealing with a group of systems that do not have a standard. I relate ADOS to OBD without a standard. Nobody wrote a set of rules. To quote one of my best friends in the industry, Bob Augustine, ADOS is not a thing. ADOS is just a group of nodes on a network that do things that, when you combine them together with deep learning and machine learning and artificial intelligence, we can protect the consumer. And that's where all the growth is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, is around that AI and machine learning. But, and the cars are going to get awfully smart. And where this calibration goes, who knows? I get 13 different predictions from 13 different engineers. But at the end of the day, when you adopt early, there's a lot of risk in that, especially when there were no standards set for the system that you're trying to service.
Well, we'll set ADOS aside. Look at what FCA did with the additional charge to be able to program modules.
Yep.
What's keeping the other manufacturers from doing that and saying, well, if you take it down to the dealership, we can program any module on the vehicle for whatever, an hour's charge, $130, $140, whatever it happens to be. But for you, independent repair shop, to get in there, we're going to charge you a base fee of $75 plus $65 per module. Plus, you have to have this certification or whatever we want to add to make it uncompetitive for me as an independent repair shop to program modules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it is...
because I don't think they'll ever go to the government. I don't think they'll ever go and say, hey, we need to set regulations to keep these independent repair shops from getting into the modules. They're not going to get involved with the government. They'll stay out of it. What they are going to do is start slapping charges on everything.
And you're 100% right. And there's nothing that the charter of somebody like NASDAQ or anybody else can do about that, because that's a business decision. And but the purpose of the right to repair, the original right to repair legislation and the MOU that was passed in, believe it or not, 8 years ago already, it's finally resulting in technology that allows the aftermarket to have access to do that without having to purchase all the subscriptions. It flattens the hill, if you will. You're going to have those spiky things like, Fiat and Chrysler come up with. But you're also going to be faced with things like Ford trying to activate a new module in an ADAS system requiring an LSID to be able to program it, to log in and activate it because of security. So I think that battle, while it's something that we tend to want to stand up and fight, I think we're probably better served with trying to out-service and provide better customer service to the motorist than the factory dealer does. I think we serve ourselves better in that light.
But you can see an independent repair shop's argument, though, right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, they can say, we're going to out-service the dealership, and a lot of them do. I think in most cases, they do. But what a shop that's trying to be profitable isn't going to look to expand their services into something that has essentially the dealership or the manufacturer has made impossible to be profitable on, or at least competitive. You can be profitable on it, but as soon as that customer finds out that program was half the cost at the dealer, they're going to wonder why they bothered. It's going to get, say what you want about service level, you still don't want to pay double or triple.
Yeah, well, I think that makes the case for technology as a service. I think that's the next path that you're going to see prop its head up. It's already doing so in the industry, and that's because that technology, the ability to compete, the hoops you have to jump through, the education and skill set that you have to continue to foster and grow within that technician or group of techs is so expensive. To be able to compete, you need to flatten that cost out. And so technology as a service becomes more viable in that you just have the technology in the building that allows one of your techs to plug that in and let somebody else program it for a flat fee while they're profitable on another job in the shop.
Isn't that going to dumb down the industry, though?
It probably will to a certain extent, but that's not at the level that's below where the top tech is today, because the technology is going to continue to advance. The technology is getting such for the next 5 to 10 years that the car doesn't change much between now and 2030. The automobile that you'll see coming off the showroom floor will have some funky looking bodies on them, and et cetera. But the technology under the hood is going to be exactly what you see today, with some avenue of, or some technology such as digital short range radar or some other Wi-Fi technology that allows the vehicle to be optimized by the Internet of Things. And it's controlling that vehicle's performance, path, navigation, things of that nature in the traffic flow is where they're going to get their improvements in fuel economy and emissions, which means that the techs that we have today have the ability to essentially work on the vehicles that we see coming in the building today, doing the same things to them, and all the other high-end technology can be taken care of by technology as a service.
Well, so you bring up some really valid points. And one of the things that makes me kind of think about here is maybe the best way to ask this question is my techs come into the shop 2 or 3 times a day sometimes. And they'll say, hey, boss man, I've gone to the NASTF website. I've gone to this website. I've gone to that website. I have looked everywhere. I don't know what I need to program this car. I don't know which website do I go to? What do I click on when I need to do this? What can you help me understand? Which software do I need to purchase?
Well, I think that's what he's saying, though. I think it's going to be technology as a service, and that'll get rid of all of that. But the problem is, I read a help wanted ad from a shop that took pride in developing top-tier technicians. I can do it all. I can do absolutely anything. As long as I have access to information, I have the ability to do whatever needs to be done. And he almost spoke disparagingly about shops that focused on quote unquote gravy work. I'm just going to do brakes. I'm just going to do suspension. And the more difficult things, I'm just going to leave it to Opus or a company like that who can just hook up. I can hook up a machine to the vehicle, and they'll let me know what part I need to replace or whatever, right? So he wanted to differentiate himself from those type of shops. Is he a dinosaur then at this point?
No, I think one of the things that you can use technology as a service to your advantage is to use that to bridge the skill set or the skill gap and the knowledge gap that you might have. You might have that, and he probably does, or thinks he has that, and kudos to him, that quality tech that he believes in and invests in. And that tech, like yours, Lucas, is still going to come to the front at times and say, man, I'm stumped on this one. I cannot find. And sometimes they wait way too long, right? They wait until they've been on safari for half the day before they ask for that help. But it's that technology as a service that whatever, whether it's an Opus or a Matt Skundrich, you don't have a Matt in every shop. That eats, breathes J2534 reprogramming. So you lean on that technology to help you with that vehicle and use it as a learning environment. Engage with that technology as a service in a way that teaches you how to overcome your knowledge gap and your skill gap for that application, so that the next time that application comes in, you don't have to make that call. You can perform that service on your own and keep 100% of the profit in your pocket.
And that's the pitch. Like when they come in and they try to sell you, something like a Drive Pro, that's the pitch. They're like, hey, I understand you want to have top tier technicians, but let us be your helper in those situations where you get stuck or the website doesn't make any sense. Like most websites, they don't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason to programming a module, right? But you look at the financial incentive for a shop to even bother hiring a technician that has those capabilities or can grow into those capabilities. There is none. If we rely solely, or the model is going to technology as a service, it's going to be, I'm going to find the cheapest guy who can competently do whatever the guy on the other side of that scanner tells him to do. And that's it. So if I can pick up that guy for $18 an hour and not to pay this other guy who's got the ability to grow into that 35, 40, 50 an hour, I'm going to take the $18 guy and make the spread. The financial incentive is to avoid developing your people. Is that healthy for the industry? What do you think?
It's to avoid developing your people to the level, to the complex level that is required for those technologies. Now, as that technology grows, I think you're looking at a window of opportunity or challenge in the industry with things like ADOS and things like reprogramming. Because be honest with yourself, in 10 years, reprogramming vehicles from about 2021, 22 and newer are going to be done over the air.
For sure.
Yeah, we won't even have the opportunity. It'll be done as just like your Windows computer updates itself on a daily basis. And that's where the technology is absolutely heading. And also keep in mind when you're talking to anybody that is offering a technology as a service, they're paying, skilled labor on their end, and those guys they're not flat rate, they're salaried. So they're trying to sell you a subscription that doesn't include unlimited hours of contact with a handful of those guys. They're hoping that you learn from every one of those experiences so that they can scale that group of techs and talent to a wider group of subscribers. So at the end of the day, so at the end of the day, they would love to help you learn how to do it and take some extra time to help you do that. So they don't have to help you, then go help somebody else, and that same person can do that. And they don't have to add butts in the seat at the call center to be able to support that.
That's very, very
and
valid
that's,
point.
I can tell you, personal experience, that's the way they think. It's scaling that so that they can service more people with the same group.
So that being said, where do we go? I've got an apprentice in the shop, right? And she's in a college program right now. She's really excited about learning the trade. Where do we focus our energy with these new technicians coming into the field? Where do we focus that training energy? Because, and I'm so thankful for the CTI training website because it gives me some tools. It gives me an avenue on where I can get them started training. You know what I mean? Because for me, it's really difficult to say, okay, just go to that class, right? Pick up this book and read it. Where do we start? And so where do you see the pathway going when it comes to training my new technician, my new apprentice that's coming into the field? What direction do we lead them? Do we look where their strengths are and train them in that direction? Do we move them in a direction where we're saying, hey, look, the industry is changing. We need to move you over here. What do you recommend a shop owner does when it comes to training their people?
Well, do we have another couple hours? This is what I think about 24/7. One is our focus today at CTI is to simplify, and that means make it easier for you as a shop owner to find that answer to the question you just asked, and make it easy for your techs to access and gain knowledge and skill from that content. So look for that to, our existing content to be modified and the process to be simplified to the point where, Lucas, when you hire an apprentice, you'll go to, a specific job role that you assign to them, and everything is taken care of. They'll have everything in front of them that they need, and you'll be able to see their progress. The second thing is that the secret sauce that we've been searching for years. I get asked all the time, do you have a technical assessment? Do you have a technician assessment that we can give our people so we know what they don't know? And for many years, we used to give 100-question test on systems bumper to bumper on the vehicle and come away with different terms like prescriptive training, where based on the answers that they gave and the gaps that we identify, we're going to prescribe this training instead of, oh, you suck at brakes, so you're going to have to take all the brake training that we have so we can make sure that we bridge that one piece of information that you really struggled with, which is stupid. That's that outcome-based education model. You've probably seen my slide a couple years ago with the monkey, the hippopotamus, the alligator, the dog, all sitting in front of the teacher, the elephant, and the elephant says, okay, today we're going to take a test. And to pass that test, you have to climb the tree. And the monkey's sitting in the tree going, this is cool. And everybody else is going, well, I'm screwed. And it's trying to measure everybody the same way. So what we're working towards, and we're in the process of doing some pilot work right now. Anthony Williams is working on a project that deals with adaptive learning. And adaptive learning is really taking the content that is in our catalog and a series of assessment tests or quizzes or knowledge checks within each of those. And based on your response to early content or early assessments, the algorithm that they use will point you and assign you automatically a short micro-learning module that bridges the gap that they've identified. Not the whole class, but Lucas, you suck at Hydro Boost, so we're going to give you a Hydro Boost class, as if you care, but you get my gist. So we take a rifle and shoot the problem rather than, put birdshot in the 12 gauge and shoot everybody in the room. And so that's really where education has got to get to, and where our focus is trying to get to the point where we know where your gaps are. But instead of measuring just knowledge, we want to get to the point where we're measuring skill and proving skill. So COVID, I mentioned earlier that COVID, being a good thing for us in that we're using the virtual classroom piece now, morning, noon, and night. So, for example, we are working with a large strategic account, doing 2-hour sessions during the day around lunchtime, and doing those a couple times a week for groups, growing their skills in a certain discipline, a certain area of the vehicle, let's say brakes or air conditioning. And those will be followed with hands-on live demonstration when we're able to go face-to-face. Today, they'll be done with by a mentor in the shop with guidance from skill sheets, is what we call them, or skill forms that are sent to the mentor to guide you, Lucas, on walking your apprentice tech through this skill, making sure that they can perform that skill. Watch them do it, correct them if they make mistakes, have them practice that, and then come back with a proof of skill event where we make appointments in those locations. They come in for the day, and we apply an oral examination, and if they pass that, a practical examination. They've got to demonstrate that they can actually perform the skill. So in an ADAS situation, you'd have to actually calibrate a vehicle, or in a brake situation, they actually have to perform all the steps in a brake service, including getting the dial indicator out and doing lateral run out. So then we know they understand the knowledge. We're only giving them remedial to help them bridge the gaps of knowledge that they have, instead of re-immersing them in the same swamp that they were in vocational school and discouraging them and disenfranchising them. And then we help them apply it, see it in action, and then practice it. And then when you're confident and ready, come back and prove that you can do it, and prove that you can say it. Saying it, just to be able to orally define what a voltage drop test is for most technicians, would be an astonishing accomplishment for this industry, let alone just do the practical, the hands-on. Because most instructors can't define voltage drop. So that's the plan. Will that happen in 21? No. I mean, it's going to take us a couple of years to get this thing launched and rolled out. But that's where the industry needs to head, is taking the opportunity that people will join you virtually and see the value in it as long as you're engaging enough. Today's pilot event with this group was probably, I guess it was yesterday's event, was probably the most engaging group of people we've had on a virtual event since the pandemic started. It astonished me. And if we can get them engaged at that, then we can focus our travel expense, our instructor expense, our facility expense on watching them do it instead of bloviating in their face at 7:00 at night.
Right. And you know, that's huge for me, right? Because you know how hardcore I've harped on this whole nighttime training thing. So that's huge. And I think that is absolutely fantastic, because I think for so long, shop owners have always looked at it and they've said, well, you know, I've got to have this guy turning a profit, right? I'm paying him. I've got to be generating revenue. And the problem is that we're constantly looking for the technician who can come in and do everything we need him to do. And there's fewer and fewer of those technicians available today. And I think it's sad that we're not looking. And I made a post a while back where I was mentioning, hey, listen, let's talk a little bit about apprentices, or mention to somebody, hey, what about an apprentice? And they're like, I would never hire an apprentice. Why? Well, they mess up this, they mess up that. So you're telling me you brought this person in and you threw them on a car. You know, I may have told you this before. Rick told me one time, he said, do you know how you train people? And I said, what do you mean? He said, do you know how you personally train people? And I said, no. He said, you take them to the edge of the dock, you kick them off, you pull the ladder out, and you say, hope you can swim as you walk away. You know, and I said, wow, our whole industry does that, you know?
As Mitch Snyder used to say, or still says, we're the only industry that eats its young. Um, at the end of the day, we have to take ownership of that. We also have to recognize, and you mentioned this early in your comment, Lucas, is that the days of being a general practitioner are coming to a close. You can be a general practitioner on the traditional services to a certain extent, but even those maintenance services are becoming complex, requiring reading and comprehension skills that are far beyond what most of the techs that really want to focus on that are doing. Those processes and procedures are getting pretty technical and critical. You've got just simple things like torque to yield bolts all over the vehicle, and not recognizing that hammering on it with a half-inch impact and banging it back on is not quite the right thing to do. And so it's those types of things as we try to grow talent, is we need to find what services we need those skills for, and what skill gaps do we not have in our inventory in our shop, and we need to hire for and grow that skill. And if we've got enough work, typically, instead of giving a tech one car and they work the ticket from top to bottom, we've got to start thinking about divvying that vehicle up. It moves from a maintenance tech to a tech that has good electronic skills, to, if you've got that Matt Skundrich guy, or the guy that understands reprogramming, and you've got that sort of situation going on, you let them handle that side of it, and then let somebody else do the hard work. Let them triage the vehicle and diagnose, and keep them busy doing that. So getting into a specialty side of things within a general shop is something I think we need to start thinking about.
Yeah, and that's a very valid point. For me, I think it's dispatching to strengths, right? And I think for so long we had this idea that we were going to bring in this A-Tech, right? In ASOG, I'm sure both of you have seen it. I'm looking for an A-Tech. Okay, what are you going to do with him when you have him? Well, I need him to fix everything. I need him to do the brakes. I need him to do the oil services. I need him. The problem is to pay this gentleman or lady fairly. You are not going to have them doing oil services and tires, right? It's not reasonable. You can't be profitable doing it. So if we're not dispatching to strengths, we've kind of missed our own bar. But David talks about this all the time. It seems like every shop wants a shop full of A-Techs. It doesn't do you any good if you can't afford them and if you can't keep them busy.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the A-Tech is, probably your most overworked, highest dollar investment, least productive guy in the shop, in That's a traditional shop. And really, if you manage his skills appropriately, he can generate the most work in the shop, but perform the least number of hours of work, of billable hours. Simply by leveraging their knowledge, their experience, their process, their strategic approach to solving problems, and letting the guys that don't have those skills perform the repair. I mean, the repair is the easy part until you get to things like David, was talking about when we're trying to reprogram, and it's the update of the weak plug with Ford. I mean, if Ford could screw up, reprogramming any worse than they're doing it today, I just can't imagine how bad that would be. But
it's about as good as their vehicles. That's fine.
It used to be found on road dead, but or fix or repair daily. Now it's fix or reprogram daily. But yeah, it's a challenge, and it's not just a challenge for. Just keep in mind, it's not just a challenge for us in the aftermarket. That those same changes are going into the dealer, and those poor guys that are getting paid flat rate at the dealer are getting hammered just as well with that. Now they've got things they can fall back on. They got a tech support group as well, but those things are available in the aftermarket as well. We just have to fight. It's a lot like politics. We just have to learn to fight. Fight for what we should have access to. Fight for the tools and equipment and information that we need to be able to compete. And then we have to be innovative in how we apply that. And we have to outsmart them, out-innovate them. And when I talk about innovation, I'm talking about how can we manage our customers' experience and time better than they can. Now, time used to be a bigger deal. I sit here at the house in my office, since March 13th. And before that, time was a significant issue for me. Now, I hate to take vacation because I feel like I've been on vacation because I work when I'm on vacation anyway. So I'm just, I'm at home. So how do we manage that for the consumer? How do we bring them the convenience touches that they're looking for in their lives by not having to think about auto repair? Because whether we like it or not, they didn't get up this morning thinking, man, I got $1,000 in the bank and David took that $1,000 last time I had it. I think I'll call David up and go give it to him. They don't want to come see us, and they don't care about the technology on their car. They really don't. They just want it to start and get to where they're going at the end of the day.
A means to an end. Do you think, and I know you're involved with lots of these people, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Yeah, I am. Do you think that many of these organizations, and this is a question I've asked in every single episode, so don't feel singled out. Do you feel like we've missed the bar when it comes to a lot of these organizations, be it local organizations, be it national organizations, on unifying our industry and getting us moving in a direction? Do you think that maybe we've not gone in the direction we should have, and nobody's really kind of unified us and said, okay, everybody, let's get in the bus and go this way?
I do, Lucas. I think about it every day. I had a conversation. In fact, I have a tremendous concern regarding my side of the business today with respect to those organizations and associations trying to survive in a pandemic where they can't hold their conferences, which are typically a revenue generating opportunity for them. And instead they're either coming together or not and holding their own virtual event. And initially we looked at the virtual events in support of those as an opportunity for us to do fewer events than we do during a year face to face. It would shock you at how much money we spend in support of associations annually in providing trainers for those events. It's a pretty doggone good top line for a big shop. And because of that, because of the ease of which they're finding that they can put these together and the cost is low and they can generate some revenue, now I've got more work to do to try to do those. And so when I talk about the association, I think associations have a great place in our industry, but they need to come together with a common goal of serving the industry rather than they tend to silo what they're doing and have their pet project. And it's not just associations, it's other groups as well, that they have these projects that they're using to, solve the technician shortage or, solve the technology issues or bring the OEMs to the table or whatever. And when you try to come together, bring them to your group and share ideas, it's, oh no, you can't join and play with us because that's our baby and we're going to do this on our own.
Right.
Competition. And I thought, what year was it that we launched Road to Great Technicians at Vision? It was probably 2013, 2014, somewhere in there, and maybe earlier than that. And we had about 8 or 9 people. It was at the NASTEF spring conference, and we had about 8 or 9 people from industry talk about what they thought the problem was as far as technician shortage. And I was asked to wrap a bow around all of that. And I can remember challenging everybody in the room to take off your name plate, take off your rank, take off your logoed shirt, leave it at the door, come sit down at one table, and let's solve this thing. We can work together to solve this. It's exactly why the military debriefs after a mission. That's why they have their rank and their names on Velcro on their uniforms. They rip it off and they throw it in the middle of the table, if you've ever watched that. And we need to do the same thing in this industry, and that is put the pride aside, put the pride of ownership aside. Let's try to find all the people that we need to have at the table and come to the table with the goal of uniting to serve the industry, not our association or our group. And that's hard to do. It's so hard. We've had good traction 3 or 4 times since then, but it tends to fall apart because the people that are leading that charge, that are investing their time and efforts into that, have day jobs and they get busy. And you end up with that we whip the horse that pulls syndrome by making those folks do all the work, and they can't do all the work. It has to be everybody that's in a leadership position that comes to the table and commits to that. And so that's a challenge in the industry. I don't know that I'll ever see it in my career. I've got about 5 more years that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to quit fighting for that. But we have to help the aftermarket not just survive, we'll survive, but to survive in a way that's meaningful and profitable and valuable to the motorists that we serve today, and not watch that churn itself into, you have to take it to the dealer because we're not allowed to do that. I don't see that happening. I see it going the other way.
Well, I remember you saying something at one point, and I'll never forget this because I always had this perspective of part vendors or training companies, and I always looked at them like, we're on an island away from them. And I heard you say something one time that really changed my perspective. You said, my job is not just serving you, but my real job is serving your customer, serving your client. I serve the end user. And that's through training you. That's through providing great parts. That's, and I think that's something that we miss all too often is we're in this together. We're all in the same damn boat. And I think it's so easy for us to lose that perspective that you guys are really out there fighting for us. You're out there fighting for the shop owners. You're out there doing work to make sure that we have a way to train our people. And for one, I want you to know that we appreciate it. I know a lot of folks in ASOG really appreciate it. What are the 3 or 4 things that you would say to a shop owner as we close this up tonight? What are the 3 or 4 things you would really want a shop owner to know? What's something that could change the life of a shop owner today if they would just take 1 or 2 actions? What would those be?
Well, that there's probably a number of them. The statement I make and the challenge that I have for my team is, and that's not just my training team, but anybody that I influence in the company, is our job is to take exceptional care, help you take exceptional care of your customer. They're the ones with the money in the checkbook that provide a living for all of us in this industry. And so we have to keep that in mind. The first thing I would tell a shop owner is to get involved and stay involved. You can't expect things to change by sitting in your shop complaining about it or poo-pooing an article in a trade magazine, or not, worse yet, not even picking up a trade mag or belonging to a group, Facebook group such as ASOG, and getting involved. Talk to your peers, voice your opinion, listen a lot. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The second thing I would do is to tell shop owners is to invest in your people. And it's not just training either. Training is a big part of it. Obviously, I'm passionate about that, but invest in your people in the way of responsibility. Involve them in your shop meetings. And for God, if you don't have shop meetings, have shop meetings. Get help, get a coach, but assuming you have meetings with your people, let them participate, let them be engaged in that. Listen to your people. Most of your technicians that you employ have been in the business for a while, and they may have worked for 3 or 4 different employers, and they may have seen some things that work and don't. And you may not have seen what they've experienced. Don't set that experience aside. There's tons of experience there. And then the third thing I would offer is when you're dealing with your supplier, and I'll speak to my company because I know them, challenge the person you deal with on a daily basis. If it's one of our commercial account managers or CAMs, if it's the general manager at the store, whoever it is, involve them in your business. Make them an integral part of your business plan and your meetings and your strategies. Make them an integral part of implementing and putting that into action, and hold them accountable to that. They should be a partner. They shouldn't be just the store you go to buy spark plugs. If they are, then you should be buying them online because you can probably get them a hell of a lot cheaper. Everybody sells car parts. It's who is invested in you and your business in a way that helps you take care of the motorist that trusts their vehicle with you, and you do such a good job that they come back and do it again. Because if they do, and we take care of you, you might come buy a part from us, and we might all survive this thing. So those are the 3 things that I'd focus on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ASOG podcast. For our All Access patrons, we will have the second half of our conversation with Chris Chesney as bonus content. So if you're not already, make sure you become a patron to catch that extra content. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. It helps spread the word. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you have any topic suggestions, please reach out to me via email. My email address is david@asog.site. That's DAVID@ASOG.SITE. Until next time.